Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about sentences and journalists, but not the writing kind of sentences. We're going to talk about something else. Lately, we have been talking a lot about how journalists convey information and how they can be better in some ways. And the thing is, what I'm about to say, most journalists know. Not all, but most. And when they don't convey it accurately, it doesn't help establish accurate expectations. And this is something that we are already getting questions about as far as Trump's laptop. Not Trump's laptop, Trump's aide's laptop, I guess. And it deals with sentencing in the federal system. And this led to a lot of questions during the sentencing for those involved with the 6th. And I'm sure it's going to lead to questions when it comes to the seditious conspiracy thing. So we're going to talk about how federal sentencing works. How many times have you heard the phrase, facing a maximum of 20 years? And then the person walks out with like an 18-month sentence. Does that mean that the judge was soft? No. The maximum amount is a number established by Congress. This is the absolute most you can sentence this person to for this crime. That's not what judges really pay attention to. Because of a court case called Booker, I think, they pay attention to something called the sentencing guidelines. The federal courts, they're part of the federal government. There's a chart. There's a chart for everything. The way federal sentences work is every crime is assigned an offense level. That offense level corresponds to a range of months. So on the chart, up and down, you have the offense level. Going across the top of the chart, you have something called criminal history category or something like that. And that is basically their record. Criminal history 1 means you don't have much, and it goes up to, I think, 6. And where those two columns, where those two axes meet, that's the sentencing range. So if it's offense level 24 and then criminal history level 2, the judge will go down to 24, go over to 2. And it will present the judge with a range. Typically, the judge sentences right in the middle of that range. But they have discretion within that range. If they go outside of it, they have to provide a reason. So, this is why you have seen people involved with the 6th have headlines that say facing a maximum of 10 years and walk out with, 18 months. Because their offense level was low and they didn't have a big criminal history. When it comes to some of the seditious conspiracy cases that are currently going on up there, you're going to see something even stranger. You will see people charged with the same thing. And if they are convicted, then their criminal histories come into play. And some of them don't have criminal histories. Some of them have extensive ones. Their sentences will be drastically different for the exact same activity. Now, as far as the espionage angle, which is what most of the messages are about. So, I want to say that there are actually 2 base offense levels there. One is, just generally gathering national defense information or something like that. And then there's another one that's a little bit higher that is gathering national defense information that poses a grave threat to U.S. national security or something along those lines. Those offense levels, that's what's going to matter, not the maximum sentence. And you see this get put out by journalists a lot. They're facing a maximum of X amount of time. And you have to wonder why. And the answer is because you can't really guess until the trial's over. You can't accurately guess what the sentence will be. You can't determine the range until the criminal proceedings are done. As an example, let's say there's a federal crime that prohibits you from having plants. Okay? The base offense level, let's say it's 10. I'm making this up, obviously. But if you have 1 to 5 plants, well, then it's 10. If you have 5 to 10, well, then it's going to be 11. If you have 10 to 50, your offense level would be 13. 50 to 100. Okay, you see how it works? Now, imagine that during the criminal proceedings, the person who was arrested with 100 plants, during one of the hearings, they find out one of the search warrants wasn't valid. And that's where half their plants were. Their sentence just dropped dramatically. So this is why journalists can't anticipate the sentence beforehand. But going to facing a maximum of doesn't really add up. Generally speaking, the person has to have basically caught all of the enhancements and have a huge criminal history to get to the maximum. Now, the other thing that comes up is journalists adding stuff. This occurred with the seditious conspiracy case up in D.C. You had multiple people who were each charged with multiple crimes. You had some journalists say, well, they're looking at 20 years for this, 10 years for this, 5 years for this. So they're looking at 35 years. Now, in the federal system, generally speaking, the sentences run concurrently. They will get sentenced on the most serious offense, and everything else runs concurrently. It runs at the same time. They don't do it consecutively. So, to directly answer the questions, what would somebody get sentenced for having this information that they allegedly have on their laptop? We have no clue. There's no real way to know that yet. You would have to wait for all the criminal proceedings to play out. So, and this is true of the cases involving January 6th, and it's true of the seditious conspiracy cases. This is true of everything in the federal system. I hope that clears that part up for everybody, because there are the downside to this. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but the downside to it is in cases where, let's say it's a cop who violated somebody's civil rights, and the people in the street, they hear that he's looking at 10 years, maximum of 10 years. But then the judge sentences them to 3. It's because that's what the guidelines said. Journalists end up setting expectations way too high when they talk about the maximums rather than the sentencing guidelines. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.